Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the upset alerts coming into this weekend. Definitely quite a few, and I think that one up in Athens between Georgia and Georgia Tech is just a little bit more interesting than some people are giving it credit for. That Georgia Tech team just finds a way sometimes to play up to their competition, but let's get into a little bit of a whip around. Let's get into a little bit of a group of five roundup. Then I want to get to some rivalry games that might not have the biggest CFP implications, but got plenty on the table, no doubt about that. But let's start with the group of five in the AAC. Very, very simple. Army and Tulane will be playing in that championship game. Army has UTSA this weekend at home. Tulane gets Memphis. If they both win out, I believe it will be Army hosting that game for the championship, so it would be a huge advantage for them. If one of them loses, then the other one would get that. But at the end of the day, those are going to be your two teams. It will be interesting to see what happens with the CFP hopes depending on what happens this weekend. If both of them win out, then the winner of that game is firmly in that second spot right behind Boise State for that CFP spot. But as of right now, we'll see if there's any explosives this weekend. But the AAC championship is set. The winner of that one's probably in a pretty good spot for the CFP. Over to Conference USA, you do have a Conference USA one that's a little bit different than a lot of the other ones out there because you have one place that is fully decided. Jacksonville State will be in the championship for this conference. Then you have Liberty, Western Kentucky, and Sam Houston State that are still very much in it. So Western Kentucky actually plays Jacksonville State this upcoming weekend. Does Jacksonville State throw out the starters? Do they kind of pull back a little bit? It will be an interesting thing to watch because if Liberty were to win, they are in. They are the team that would probably get in no matter what. If they were to win, they are the team that would get precedent. They are playing actually Sam Houston, so a lot of intermingling from this group up here. But at the end of the day, if Liberty wins, they are going to be the team from those last three that would get into the mix. If Liberty loses and then Western Kentucky wins, they would be in. And then if Sam Houston wins and Western Kentucky loses, then Sam Houston would be in. So a little bit confusing, but Liberty is kind of taking the cake right now. It seems like it could be Liberty, Jacksonville State. If Liberty does fall, then the door opens for a Western Kentucky or for an Sam Houston, depending on what happens in that other game. So a lot of moving parts there, but it is going to be Jacksonville State against one of those three teams at the end of the day. Over to the MAC. This is a very, very relatively clear at this point with some little questions here and there. So there's one game this weekend that you're going to want to watch. It is Miami of Ohio against Bowling Green. The winner of that game will be in the title game no matter what. The loser will be out no matter what. So that's a huge game, no doubt about it. And then you do have Ohio and Buffalo. Ohio plays Ball State. As long as they win, they're heading to the title to play the winner of that game. If they were to lose, then Buffalo, if they were to beat Kent State, could find their way in. So a little bit of moving parts there. You do know that one of the teams in that championship will come from that Miami of Ohio Bowling Green game. Then you'll just have to wait for that Ohio game. I tend to believe they're going to beat Ball State, so I would bet it's going to be Ohio against the winner of Miami of Ohio and why am I blanking here? And Bowling Green. I don't know why I was blanking there, but Miami of Ohio Bowling Green, that winner against Ohio is my guess for this championship. And then the Mountain West. This one's a layup, no doubt about that. We have Boise State. They're essentially in the title game. UNLV and Colorado State are right there. If UNLV wins, if Colorado State wins, it will be UNLV. If UNLV were to lose and Colorado State were to win, it would be It would be Colorado State going to play Boise State. If both of them lose, it would be UNLV. So just to make it pretty easy there, Boise State has punched their ticket. They will play one of UNLV or Colorado State, with UNLV kind of having the inside track there. And then over to the Sun Belt, you do have the East and West in this one, kind of a lone conference in that respect. But Marshall over in the East is set to go to the conference title if they can beat JMU on the road this weekend. If they were to lose, Georgia Southern could steal that spot with a win over App State. So those are the two teams that are really battling it out right now. Will be interesting to watch that unfold. I tend to believe Marshall's going to get that win against JMU, but Georgia Southern's right there and will be really interesting to watch that unfold. One of those two teams is going. If both of them lose, I believe it will be Marshall regardless. So definitely something to watch over there in the East. In the West, Louisiana is leading the way to the title right now, and if they can beat ULM, who has lost 5 straight, they will be in that spot. But if they were to lose, Arkansas State could get in with a win over Old Dominion. If both of them lose, if Arkansas State as well as Louisiana lose, the winner of the South Alabama-Texas State game could find their way into it. So it would be wild. A lot of different things that could happen in the west of the Sun Belt right now, but as of right now, it feels like it's probably going to be Louisiana against Arkansas State. Those are two teams that it should be Louisiana heading to the championship from the West. If they do lose, I feel pretty good that Arkansas State will beat Old Dominion and be that team, but obviously still plenty up in the air around the group of five. But wanted to make sure you guys had a full update on the group of five as we head into this final weekend. We'll obviously give you full picks on all of those games next weekend, but definitely a lot that are really, really interesting going into the final weekend. Feels like every single conference is still very much undecided going into that final week. But a couple of under the radar games that I just had to get on the radar as we get into rivalry weekend. Louisville, Kentucky, one of the more under the radar, underrated in general rivalries in college football, at least in my opinion. This one's going to be about pride more than anything else. Louisville has started the season really, really strong, felt like they were kind of rolling downhill, and then things kind of hit a roadblock. Against SMU, they got beat against Notre Dame. Things started really falling apart. So it's really just about getting that win over the team that you hate the most and finishing this season with an 8-4 record, feeling a little bit more confident in your team going forward. But then on the other side, you do have Cutter Bowler, and Boley, excuse me. Cutter Boley is a very interesting player. He's a freshman that came in last week for Brock Vandagriff in the Texas game, and he was pretty impressive. The kid can really sling the ball around the field, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that I would just go ahead and make him the starter. I haven't seen anything definitive on that front, but I would go ahead and make him the starter, let him get ready for the rest of the season, and let him get ready especially for 2025, because I really do think that could be a very special player for Kentucky. And then for Louisville, they're just trying to get to 8-4, salvage this season that was a little bit disappointing. It wasn't going to be quite as beautiful as 2023 was for them, but definitely there was a moment there where it looked like they might have been in the mix for the CFP and pretty quickly fell out. But I think this one should be a really fun battle. I think both these teams want this one very badly, especially Mark Stoops, because there's some talk around Lexington right now that should make him just a little bit nervous. But at the end of the day, a really fun rivalry game that I just never miss, because I always love the passion that comes out of this one. Not so much a rivalry game here, but definitely a very interesting one. Kansas-Baylor is one you're going to want to watch in the Big 12 this upcoming weekend, because it opened at Kansas -1, then flipped to Baylor -1, now it's back to Kansas -1. So it's going to be really awesome. This game is going to be crazy, and Baylor trying to keep the craziest path in the world alive for the Big 12 championship would be really interesting to watch. And Kansas just trying to continue to play spoiler for a lot of these teams that have high hopes. They're trying to ruin that, and it's going to be a run battle. I can absolutely promise you that. Baylor has really gotten the offense going with Byron Washington running the ball, as well as Sawyer Robinson really helping out running the ball at the quarterback position, and then pretty much ditto for Kansas when you talk about Devin Neal and Jalen Daniels. They've really opened this thing up, and they're a really dangerous duo running the football. So I think it's going to be a really fun one, and both teams have plenty to play for, one playing for bowl eligibility, one playing for just a shot at the Big 12 championship. A lot on the table, and I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch. I'll go ahead and take Kansas. I do think they're going to get to a bowl game. I'm not going to be the dummy that picks against Kansas again when they're on this run, so I'll go with Kansas to clear out at least one of the teams in the crazy 9-team scenario that could happen in the Big 12. Florida State, a game that you hate to see not be as important as it should be. This is one of those games that when you see those two teams with those two jerseys on that field, feels like it should be for more. But at the end of the day, two teams that are in very, very different spots going into this game, where you have DJ Lagway, you have all the energy around Florida football, feeling great about this team going into 2025. And then you have Florida State, who had the weirdest year of all time, had one of the worst turnarounds I've ever seen, and now we're just grasping at straws. They're just trying to find a win somewhere. They're trying to find something to make this thing look a little bit better. Getting this win over Florida would do exactly that. But Florida's not losing this game. I'll just be plainly honest with you guys. Florida State is a team that has been really good at losing games. They've been really good at not necessarily playing quite as hard as they possibly could. I don't think it's going to stop now. I think the Gators go in and absolutely roll in this game. I think DJ Lagway puts on a show, and I think Florida ends the year 7-5 after a million different calls for Billy Napier's job throughout this year. Oklahoma LSU, one of the kind of manufactured rivalries that is trying to be set up by the SEC, and I really like it. I do think these two teams can kind of get after each other just a little bit. Kind of a pseudo Texas Arkansas. Obviously, the Texas Arkansas has a lot more history than this one, but I do think this one could be a very fun one to watch in coming years. And Oklahoma's coming off their game of the year, no doubt about that. Jackson Arnold was able to just grind down the Alabama defense and running the ball. Xavier Robertson as well in that, and then the defense was absolutely flying around. This will be no different. I think this team got the juice that they absolutely needed, and I think they'll be flying around on Saturday. Now, the question is for LSU, they had a very solid performance against Vanderbilt, no doubt about that. They're going to need to be a lot better on Saturday. This is a very good defense, very disciplined, very hard to get a beat on. You're going to have to be very, very good, especially up front in pass pro, because when you talk about this Oklahoma team, the best way to beat them is hit them with deep balls, and LSU can absolutely do that. I'll take the Tigers in this one. It's going to be a very, very fun game, and definitely one that I think could kind of spark a little bit of a rivalry down there in Baton Rouge and Norman. But at the end of the day, I am going to go with LSU to finish the season at least on a relatively strong note. They won't be happy down there in Baton Rouge, but at the very least, they will have 2 straight wins to hang their hat on, and they'll move into the offseason hoping that a lot of things can fall into place. And then finally, the game that is not all that important when you talk about the CFP race is very important when you talk about the history of these programs, because you remember it last year, Oregon was about 2 plays away from being in the CFP. I mean, they lost by 3 points to Washington early in the year. I believe they lost by 3 points in the Pac-12 championship. I got all the conferences totally mixed up, but in the Pac-12 championship, they fell again. They were left out of the CFP for that reason. So they're going to be coming for blood. I can absolutely promise you that. These teams are going to get after each other. It's going to be really fun, and weirdly enough, they have a player from that Washington team that made them so mad in Jabbar Muhammad on the Oregon team now, so it's going to be interesting, but at the end of the day, Jordan Birch felt that, Tez Johnson felt that, a lot of players on that team felt what it was like to lose to that team 2 games in the same season. I don't think it's going to happen again. I think Oregon is 1 game away from a rematch in Indianapolis against Ohio State. I think they want to get there undefeated. I think they are going to get there undefeated. I'm going to pick Oregon in this one. I think they end as the only undefeated Power 4 team, which would be quite the accomplishment, because early in the season I did have a hot take that no one in the Power 4 would end undefeated. Oregon, if you were to lose this weekend, I would kind of appreciate it. That would be a very, very cool finish to my prediction. But at the end of the day, I do think Oregon wins that game, goes undefeated, heads on their way to Indianapolis, and a lot of really fun games. And we'll break down some of the bigger marquee games tomorrow, but wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to Florida State, gave a shout out to Oklahoma LSU, or to a couple other of these games that definitely do deserve it. So wanted to break those down real quickly, but let's take our last break here. And when we come back, we got Top 15 Tuesday for you. And it is a very weird one. As you can imagine, a lot of SEC teams found their way out of the rankings. One SEC team found their way in, and I think some people are going to be a little bit upset about it. But I'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.